All right, so it's been a couple weeks already. I got sick, kids got me sick, all good. And man, oh, my hair, jeez. All right, feeling the vibes here. So if you've been watching me for the past about 2 years, I've been shooting primarily with the Sony a7 III. I also have my B camera, which is the Sony a6iv, which is what I'm shooting with now. And I love both of these cameras. They've been great. They work very well. Have no problems with them. I'm at like a crossroads right now. I'm not sure which camera to upgrade to, which is kind of like why I'm making this video, to see, one, get your thoughts and inputs, and maybe you guys will help me make a decision. Now, Sony, for the past 2 years or so, I have been releasing some really awesome cameras, one being the Sony a7S III. Finally had a chance to use this camera about 2 weeks ago at a wedding. The coloring and the specs, everything that comes with that Sony a7S III is really dope. Coming into present time, you know, the Sony a7 IV has been released. That camera, to me, honestly, is a really awesome camera from both the video and photo perspective. Now, there's also the Sony FX30 that was just released, and to me, that's like a really awesome B camera, maybe A camera for those that are just starting off, as well. Might be even good for my own arsenal for the things that I want to do with this channel. And yeah, so I'm kind of like back and forth as to which one to go with. Now, one of the main reasons for this video is to get your input on which camera you think would be best to either upgrade to, or if you're first time getting into Sony, you know, switching over from different brands, the types of people that would get a specific camera. So I kind of broke it down to 3 different types of people. One is the photographer. The other one is the videographer, and the other one is the hybrid shooter. And I specifically want to speak about the Sony a7 IV and the Sony FX3, because I have a feeling that there's people out there that are switching cameras because they want to and they think it's cool to do, but really they're making a mistake. So the first one, the photographer. Stills is super important for the photographer. Megapixels is important to the photographer for the most part, especially if you're dealing with print or you're dealing with high resolution type of photography, like printing billboards and like macro photography and all that stuff. Now, there's a majority of photographers that don't need like 60, 85, 100 megapixels in a camera, but you know, between 25, 30, even 40, like that would work well depending on obviously your workflow and what industry you're in. For me, as a wedding photographer and also a portrait photographer, you know, the Sony a7 IV has really good resolution. So maybe if you are starting off in photography, or maybe you want to switch over from another brand, and sure, the FX30 looks like a cool camera, but it's not as high in megapixels, and you only got like 1 frame a second, which is like not the greatest scenario unless you're that dope of a shooter that you can just shoot 1 frame and just land it, ready to roll. But if you're a normal photographer that shoots either weddings, events, you know, portraits, you know, more than 1 frame per second makes more sense for you to get. All right, so let's talk about the videographer, the cinematographer, the person that does the video camera guy. This is actually kind of a split in between decision personally. If you are transitioning from one brand, say for instance Canon or Fuji, and you're planning on going to Sony and your primary job is cinematography, mini docs, regular like documentary type videos, even weddings, then I would totally go with the FX30. Maybe in the future you might want to pair it with the FX3 that's full frame. And you do have the kits out there being sold with the 11mm lens. They also have the kits that come with the XLR cable box and the handle for like $2 grand, and for that type of setup and for that type of spec that's inside that camera, I mean, it's a steal. It's a great deal. However, Sony a7 IV, you still get the flippy screen just like the FX30, right? It's a full frame camera, so you got more of that depth of field. Also, it shoots at 4K 60. The crop factor, sure. Big deal, honestly, I don't see the big deal. But if that's something that's important to you, then you know, might want to consider it. Honestly, if the crop factor is really that big of a deal, then get an FX30 or even the FX3 that's a full frame, but it's a straight cinema camera. Honestly, I don't see a big deal when it comes to that crop factor. Either one, choose the right lens for the type of content that you're shooting. Take a couple steps back. I mean, if that bothers you that much, you know, you could just do that. Okay, so the next person I want to talk about is me. Well, not really me, but the type of person is the hybrid shooter. The person that dabbles both with the photo and the video. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. I think if you're this type of person, you might want to think twice about getting either camera body. And this is why I personally am stuck as to which one, even though I kind of have an idea just after talking like where I'm gonna go with. If you're a hybrid shooter and you don't have any lenses and you're planning on switching over to Sony, but you're primarily a photographer and that's your job and that's what you do, I would suggest the Sony a7 IV. Obviously, again, going back to the frames per second, going back to like, you know, you get like 1 frame a second versus like a lot of frames per second. I forget the number off the top of my head. Now, because of my own workflow and the way I do things here on my own, I think that I'm gonna have to hold out on that FX30 and maybe rent it when I need to, or maybe buy it in the future and go with the a7 IV. One, because I shoot weddings. It would be great to have a new A body for weddings and for portraits. Keep my Sony a7 III as my secondary camera. Maybe sell the a6600 and put the difference on the FX30. Then I have like the best of both worlds. And they're separated from the types of jobs that I'm doing. More than likely, that's probably what's gonna happen. So if you're one of these people, the photographer, cinematographer, the hybrid shooter, let me know in the comments down below if you have already upgraded, if you're planning on upgrading. Would you prefer a APS-C Super 35 camera cinematography vibe situation, or would you go with something that's really awesome? Sony a7 IV, good for hybrid shooters. All right, well, that was good. I mean, I probably spoke really fast like I usually do, so I'm working on that one too, guys. I apologize. It's a Philly thing.